we were to have such a notion of responsible sovereignty, we would have to, of course, rethink and recalculate our national interest. Because together with the idea of responsible sovereignty would probably come the acceptance of the fact that if I, as a politician, want to go to international conferences and get a good deal so that I can proudly go home and tell my voters, as a result of this international cooperation, your welfare will be enhanced, we will be better off. Every politician wants to do that. They cannot go home and say, I was a fool, they pulled me across the table. It's not possible. So either they don't get involved in anything or they want to have a positive outcome. But if I want to do it, then I have to grant also the fact that every other delegation coming to an international conference would like to go home and say, I got something positive for us. There must be, as Hazel also underlined, there must be win-win deals. Now, we have done also everything that I'm proposing. We have tried to figure out in detail. We have done studies on what it costs us not to act on problems and what it costs to take corrective action in a timely way, like on financial crisis or climate change or so. And these studies show that inaction is up to 400 times more expensive than taking corrective action. It also shows that in the first time around, many international bargains produce winners that have such big wins, that they could easily pay off the others so that everybody could go home with a positive outcome and feel engaged and feel like actually it's worth following up and doing something. Today we have these forced agreements, often if we have them at all, but since people didn't have a voice, they feel, I go home, I don't do anything. And as a result, we let problems drag on and get worse. So we have to undertake cost-benefit analysis that take into account that we want to achieve win-wins. And we will find out that in most instances, we would still win, whoever we are. Or if we don't win, then we at least know how much we have to ask for in order to achieve win-win. So, but how does such win-win come about? Should we drop generously crumbs from the bargaining tables? No. My third proposal is, if it is correct that nation states are basically private actors, when they appear internationally and go for their national advantage and also want to be treated fairly, then we really have to look at international negotiations as a political market. It's a market. And states at the national level have this sort of harmonizing role very often. But when they are internationally, they are shrewd national actors pursuing particular interests, and therefore international negotiations have nothing in common with the policy-making process nationally. They are a political market. Interestingly enough, if you watch international negotiations, they have all the characteristics that we do not permit anymore in national markets. You have monopole or oligopole, the North Atlantic Alliance, ramming everything through in most instances, except for Copenhagen. We don't like oligopoles in economic markets, but we tolerate them in political markets. Some delegations in Copenhagen had 1,500 members, others had 3. Information asymmetries. When it comes to my favorite global public goods, free riding, let others pay, I wait, So we really, I would think we would gain a lot if we were to give up the notion that governments are the same when they appear internationally. No, they are private actors, and we have to analyze their behavior through the lens of markets rather than states. So we want an efficient market, political market. How do we get it? By giving, preferably, everybody an effective voice so that they can fend for themselves, And again, changes in this direction are underway. From the G8, we moved to the G20, and even now we feel that maybe the G20 has to be rethought, has to have rotating membership maybe, so that everybody is better represented. Voice reform in the Bretton Woods institutions. So changes also in this direction are underway. But we need more democracy at the international level. In order to know when do I gain, when do I lose, from whom could I ask for compensation, like Africa in the case of climate change, we have to stop negotiating things like climate change or poverty reduction, things that are too big to understand. And we have to break it down, good by good, global public good by global public good, and therefore we actually introduce the concept of global public goods. Because we have to do to public policy concerns, we have to give them the same favor that we give private goods. I have never seen, let's say, Boeing airplane company, sit there in their board and say, if we only had a Dreamliner, wouldn't that be nice? But in the UN, we sit and say, let's reduce poverty, and then nothing happens. So we thought by introducing the notion of a global public good, we would say, hey, goods have a production path. You have to think through how you get to the goods. So let's think what the inputs are, who has to provide them, when, and all of that. So we have a lot of discussion on the production path of global public goods. Again, reality is very clever and way ahead of us, I would argue, because what you see is a lot of single issue specific international cooperation mechanisms. The Global Health Fund, the Global Environmental Facility, biodiversity mechanisms, so many things, very issue specific, because there we can work out the incentive structures, know better how to involve also private actors. So my plea would be foster, and recommendation, foster this issue specificity. Don't try to kill it, as many people who are coming out of the aid community try to do. Because the aid community is used to country relations, but the new world requires to focus on issues, not only countries. We have to deal with issues. So my last recommendation is, as you can gather, all of this requires a new diplomacy. Why this? Because in this interdependent world, where we want to actually get to problems being resolved, lest the bad things continue to travel, we need to achieve results, we need to have effective cooperation, we need commitment from all sides, we need win-win thinking, which diplomats traditionally do not bring along. They are thinking in, either leaning back, maximizing in the short run a national advantage, bombing countries, but you can't bomb HIV/AIDS out of the world. You can't bomb financial stability into the world. These power politics will continue to remain important, but we have to learn that in certain areas, our national advantage will be enhanced through cooperation and striving for mutual benefit. That rethinking has to be instilled into the next generation of diplomats. I don't know whether the older ones will still be able to turn themselves around. So in conclusion, I think what we see from all of this is that a new policy domain has emerged, a domain of global public policy that cuts across national borders, and where we have to have complementary policy inputs at the national level and at the international level. We have to think through the whole production cycle of the global public good. What do we have to do nationally, what internationally? And 95% of all inputs to global public goods are happening at the national level, because you have to strengthen health systems nationally to kill diseases. You have to strengthen financial supervisory authorities nationally in order to foster financial stability.